Hello and welcome everyone to Insights. I'm Nnamdi Adipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you for joining us.
This week on Insights, we review the landmark National Health Act of 2014 and the disconnect between the law and the realities for millions of Nigerians. Otorhinolaryngologist, health policy and management expert, Professor Titus Sunday Bekwe, will be speaking about the decade-old law, its projected benefits and subsisting challenges. Elizabeth?
Of course, this week we'll be celebrating servicemen, veterans, and fallen heroes who paid the price to safeguard our sovereignty. And Morenike Grace Henry, Chairman, National Council for the Nigerian Legion, will speak to us.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
It's been a decade since the landmark National Health Act became law in 2014, yet there appears to be a profound disconnect between legal entitlements and the reality for millions of Nigerians. The Act in itself guarantees free emergency care, and a basic minimum package of health services funded by dedicated public resources. However, I'm not sure which is worst, whether it is the widespread ignorance or the systemic failure over time, that have continued to render these rights and protections ineffective. Again, I ask, which is worse? Is it the fact that most Nigerians are unaware of the healthcare rights that they have as provided, again, by the law, or is it the inability of institutions and the general healthcare system to enforce these rights? My guest is Professor Titus Sunday Ibekwe, otorhinolaryngologist, health policy and management expert. Professor Ibekwe is also the Provost, College of Health Sciences, University of Abuja, as well as being the Secretary General, Association of Provosts of Colleges of Medicine in Nigeria. That's the association known as APCOM. Professor, I'm glad to have you come into the studio to speak on the issue that we have at hand. Thank you so much indeed for making the time.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Happy New Year to Nigerians. I'm glad to be here.
Compliments of the season to you,
Yeah,
Prof.
thanks.
Well, it will seem like I sounded like my primary focus, or the primary focus of our discussion will be on sections 20 of the NHA, which makes provision for rights to emergency care. But that's not my ultimate intention. I know the law is expansive, so I would like for you to begin your intervention by laying out the key intentions of the law, whilst relating that or speaking to the core provisions, or its core provisions for basic health care and maybe even health insurance for Nigerians. In essence, Prof, can you just speak to us about the intentions of the law, the projected benefits, and juxtapose that against the existing realities on ground?
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a very, very instructive topic, and I will also say that it's a topical one, given the turmoil that Nigerians are going through right now regarding their health care, procurement of health care, and the healthcare dilemma in the healthcare system generally. As you rightly pointed out, this is a journey of over a decade. I recall very vividly the active role, played by all stakeholders then towards pushing and enforcing that this National Health Act come to fruition. The key role played by Nigerian Medical Association, by the rest of the health medical associations, and even the HEFRON. HEFRON is Health Reform Foundation of Nigeria. It was a coalition, activity gelled with members of the National Assembly who actually saw reason and lots of pressures and presentation that led to this act, which
True, I remember the public hearings.
Yes.
They were quite engaging at the time.
Excellent. I was the national vice president of Nigerian Medical Association then. So it took a lot to ensure that this act came to being. And I can tell you that if this act is followed to letters, the problem we're having right now will be a thing of the past. You know, but the problem is usually implementation, not just the content of the act. The content of the act is excellent. If only 70% of this content could be implemented, there is going to be a huge turnaround in the running the health system of Nigerians and giving succor to the Nigerian healthcare system.
Can you perhaps put that in segments? Say we take 2 or 3 segments in terms of the provisions of the act now and how it could benefit, should benefit Nigerians as envisaged and projected in the original law. Take us through 1, in terms of health coverage.
Yes.
2, in terms of governance and accountability.
Yeah.
And 3, in terms of enforcement.
Yeah. This is a law that is really holistic, you know, that's couched to protect, couched to, at the same time, spell clearly the rights of both Nigerians and even the healthcare givers, because as Nigerians have their own rights, so the healthcare givers have their right. It is also a law that, you know, try to protect everybody and spelled out clear-cut punitive measures for anybody that failed to keep to his or her own bargain of part of this act. Take, for instance, the key segment, which is not so bogus in that place, but we can say that is like the soul of, the act, the consolidated revenue.
Yeah.
They said minimum at least 1%, because I recall then there was a lot of argument here and there that 1% wasn't enough. But at the end of the day, at least 1% of the consolidated revenue of the Federal Republic, of the Federation. And what does this mean? Because when we talk of consolidated revenue, some people mistake this to be the budget of the country. It is not. It means every revenue that is generated into the Nigerian public coffers, be it coming from taxation, be it coming from sales that Nigeria make, including the oil revenue, everything put together. Minimum 1% of it should be set aside.
Prof, I reckon you're talking about the BHCPF.
Yes, that's right. And what is this meant for? To cater for the poorest of the poor. So whereby emergency medical care, will be free of charge. Anybody that has an emergency health system, emergency issues, can walk into any hospital and get that procured and sorted out. It is from this consolidated pool that the federal government and indeed the segment of the government that is in charge of this will be able to pay the healthcare providers, who treat such Nigerians. Are you getting that?
Yes.
It also takes care of, maternal and health care and child issues. When it comes to pregnant women, they'll access health care free of charge, irrespective of where they are. That law clearly teased out the 3 tiers. It divided the healthcare system into 3, whereby the primary health care is handled by the local government, clearly stated, assisted by state government. I can say that today is even made easier by the federal government granting autonomy to, the local government, so that their funding can come directly to them. So they are fully in charge of primary health care. Whereas the secondary healthcare system is the key responsibility of the state government. And tertiary healthcare system and quaternary healthcare is the responsibility of federal government. You can see there is a clear division of labor here now,
yes,
if you agree with me. Okay, then it is also from this consolidated fund that it is expected that preventative healthcare system will also be maintained. So when you talk of things associated with immunization and all those to prevent infections and healthcare deterioration from happening, it is to be procured directly from there, And this is why this same law states that no healthcare facility should refuse attending to any emergency situation. But you can see that it takes two to tango. He has already made provision for the fund that should be used for offsetting those treatments. For that reason, if that fund is available, then no healthcare provider has any reason to say, I will not treat.
But therein lies the challenge, Prof. I mean, the fact that, this BHCPF, the funding, of course, remains a major challenge in the full implementation of the law. You've talked about how, and we're talking about just 1% of the consolidated revenue funds here.
Right.
To be allocated annually to the basic health care provision fund. But from your assessment, what structural and oversight deficiencies do we continue to suffer, essentially in these regards, enough to subvert the gains that this law originally and ordinarily promises?
This is a very, very instructive question, very, very important. I can tell you that it's the will that is lacking here. It's as simple as that. The will to implement this law down to the letters. Once implementation is done, it's El Dorado for Nigerians and for our healthcare system. It's enrooted into three, what I would call the tripod, of any progressive country. I call it SHE. As in my book is clearly written there, which you talk of security, you talk of healthcare, and you talk of education. These three are like tripods that is carrying any progressive nation, okay? And the health is like the nucleus of that three. Because whereas you don't have security around us, it's not assured. Even the healthcare providers are not protected. So they can't come out at odd hours to really take the call of their duty and responsibilities. And even the patient themselves will be afraid to present themselves at very odd hours when emergency situation calls to duty, come knocking. So people who are supposed to invest from within and outside our country will shy away from coming to invest to ensure that our robust healthcare system keep growing, okay? You talk of the health itself. It's only a healthy nation that has healthy workforce that will be able to boast of being able to, propagate a system that works. Then health education itself will help us reduce diseases and poverty by more than 50%. Just simple healthcare, good healthcare enlightenment, will help to do a lot. So these three are very, very key. Okay, if you look at our current discourse, now is now entangled and enmeshed with the Act in 2022, which is the National Health Insurance Act. They're like Siamese twins that you cannot separate. Because that particular act clearly stated that every Nigerian, must be enrolled into our insurance health system. Because I can tell you that out-of-pocket expenses does not work anywhere, even in the richest countries. You must have a functional insurance system, which is like collecting, putting in a pool, and using a commonwealth to service those that need it at any particular point in time. And in 2022, the revision of this act is very clear. So every Nigerian should be captured in the insurance system. But up to today, I can tell you that the coverage is no more than 10%. Within the last documentation, we're talking of about 6 to 8%, when Ghana was busy celebrating 60% of coverage, So it's enforcement of these laws that is really where I would say that the problem lies. Not that we don't have excellent policies, well articulated and well crafted, that if we follow down to letters, it will turn things around. Now we are talking of...
Doesn't that amount to a waste of our time? And I honestly, Prof, I do not know how else to describe it. I recall that I think it was in 2008, there was an attempt to rework this law, to rework this act. There was also an attempt in 2012. 2008, I think, was during former late President Yar'Adua's time.
Right.
He did not sign. He did not sign the act at the time. I think it was tabled.
It was Jonathan that signed the 2014.
Yes, 2014. But even before 2014, there was also an attempt in 2012.
I told you it has been a progressive...
Yes, it was a work in progress.
A work in progress.
And then at the time, they said these other laws were self-serving, they were not expansive enough, and all of that. And then we got to 2014. That was how we jumped.
Absolutely.
From 2004 to 2014. And then we got the law. Now implementation becomes an issue. Prof, you've rightly said well, rightly or wrongly, you've said the issue is will. This will that you're talking about, are we talking about political will to implement? Because, and that will take me to, this whole issue, and you've alluded to it, and, I referenced it in my intro, this whole talk about emergency care in Nigeria. Of course, within the context of the same law that we're talking about, these tenets are provided for in the National Health Act, in sections 20 of the National Health Act. So we see that rather than the objectives and provisions of this law playing out, we constantly see a situation where hospitals, whether they are public teaching hospitals or whether they are government-owned health facilities, they routinely violate this section 20 of this law that we're talking about by refusing emergency stabilization to patients without payment.
Yeah, this point you raise is very important. If you recall, if you recall, I said it takes two to tango.
True.
I'm very, very unbiased here because it's about the healthcare system of we Nigerians. I can be a patient tomorrow. Forget about the title I'm bearing. I'm a medical doctor, but doctors are also human beings. So we need it. We need this to work.
So, Prof,
this act made it very, very clear before the promulgation of that part of that section 20. Before then, we have talked about setting aside minimum
1%.
Minimum 1%.
Yes.
And this 1% is to service what we're discussing now, which is to ensure that anybody that walks in gets, because that's what the 1% is meant for. But whereas it's not available, doctors and medical personnel have treated in the past and nobody to make the refund. You agree with me that they will wind up. They will go out of business if they continue. So it takes two to tango. Let's ensure that this law works.
How then can we resolve this issue? Because apparently, I mean, there can be enforcement by whether the ministries or regulatory agencies if citizens cannot access emergency care without payment, as provided for in this same act, and as provided for by even the section that talks about providing 1% of the consolidated revenue funds.
I can tell you this for free. My teaching hospital, for instance, University of Abuja Teaching Hospital, I know they have made a lot of losses over time because to the best of their ability, they uphold this. You walk in there, you're treated. If it's an emergency, they start treatment. A lot of time, they don't even know who. That's why you see every accident victim rushing to University of Abuja Teaching Hospital. They start treatment, stabilize, do everything. But at the end of the day, most of the time, you won't even see the relatives of the patient at the end of the day. And this 1% or minimum 1% is not working. That should have offset and take care of that. Okay, let's say because it's a federal government agency, so they have some shocks and supports here and there. But if it is primarily, a primary private entrepreneur that doesn't have any support from anywhere, it becomes, it can't be self-sustainable any longer if they keep on doing this, and when you're supposed to go to clearing house and get those sorted out, it's not done. So it's still early enough because your worry is, where do we start from? I can tell you that what we're doing now is a starting
10 years
point.
after?
Yeah, it's better. Whenever you wake up, it's your own morning. So that we're discussing,
that's an Igbo adage, by the way.
we're talking about this. That's it. We're talking about this and discussing it now. And we also have a very responsive Federal Ministry of Health. Of course, the current Minister of Health is somebody who is very deeply enrooted, very knowledgeable about, healthcare system, has worked with the best of international bodies and all those. So he should just brace it up and ensure that this, one of his legacies, and the legacy of indeed this administration of President Bola Tinubu, is to ensure that this is implemented down to letter. And a rider to that is what we call the Abuja Declaration, because some of these things you cannot disentangle. They move together. Nnamdi in 2000, under President Obasanjo, Abuja hosted all African nations to a treaty where they discussed, the issue was primarily on healthcare, how to get it correct and get it right across the continent. At the end of the day, following research and presentations and deep, interface and intercourse of ideas, they came up with this, that minimum that is needed for any functional healthcare system for any nation is minimum is 15% budgetary allocation of such a country to healthcare system. And indeed, all the African countries in attendance, including Nigeria, the host, they signed this treaty. But I can tell you that between that 2000 till now, we have never gotten there. In fact, we're dancing around 5% to 8%, which I can tell you the best is like 50% of minimum that is required. So how would you be able to get it right then? I bet that we have the best, healthcare professionals. I can beat my chest and tell you that. Because if you go to the best healthcare centers across the world, you see arrays of healthcare professionals, Nigerians, who are there giving services, and they are highly sourced for because of the level of training that they are given in this country of ours. So we have the best, that is true. And that's why they are being poached left, right, and center. And you must do something to be able to retain yours, because labor moves towards higher wages.
True.
No matter how we preach till tomorrow. So we must be very intentional towards seeing how we reverse this system as much as possible.
And better the system here. Otherwise, we continue to have this migration of skills from Nigeria to other parts of the world.
Correct.
Prof, I see how you've placed everything on the table of our inability or government's inability to meet that provision of the law that talks about allocating 1% of the consolidated revenue fund, for the provisions of, issues like emergency care.
Yeah. And the enforcement of...
enforcement, because it comes down to enforcement.
Yeah, enforcement.
Yes,
and,
it comes down...
and recall, I said that it cannot be disentangled from the National Health Insurance Act.
Yes.
So the insurance system must also work to be able to give succor and support to this. And our budgetary allocation system must be a functional one. We should aim at that minimum of 15%. I tell you, Nandi, if we're able to get this round, these three right, Nigeria is going to be the hub as it used to be. In the early days, people from all developed countries will come here to source for their health because we have what it takes, and we're going to render that at even cheaper rates. The turnaround that happened in India is going to be the portion of Nigeria. Once we do that, you'll see our best of the best coming back to invest here.
Yeah.
That will just be another of the day. And all these stories will be a thing of the past.
Yes, Prof. And I was going to say that I agree with you, and I do agree with you. The problem is enforcement. And a lot of people have raised issues about how to go about enforcing, these provisions of the law. And, specifically because it is a law. And how do you compel government to enforce a law that it pushed or made in the first place? I'm talking about the gap between legislative intent now and judicial enforcement.
Absolutely.
NHA aims to operationalize rights to health. This right, a lot of people say, yes, it's generally considered non-justiciable.
Yeah.
Meaning you cannot directly enforce, or it's not directly enforceable in court.
Oh yeah, it's non-justiciable. You're right.
Justiciable, sorry.
That is part of our constitution. That should also
chapter
be,
2. Chapter 2 of the
very correct. And we have been laying a lot of emphasis on that.
Yes, exactly. So the thing is, how then do we? Because you can't compel government. I can't, for instance, sue government for failing to meet these fundamental objectives. I mean, I can't say, okay, the Constitution places the right to health under fundamental objectives, which is legally non-justiciable. So I just wonder what then becomes the role of effective enforcement of a law or a law like this when citizens cannot easily sue the government for failing to provide these fundamental services.
Well, your dilemma.
I know, yes.
Your dilemma
legal matters now.
Your dilemma is as good as mine. The law is expressly clear on that. I'm not a lawyer, but as a Nigerian, all of us strive to read our constitution because it's like where we draw our mandate from, our strength from. Government is law. and the law is government. The three arms of the government, you talk of the executive, you talk of the judiciary, you talk of the legislation. These are the tripod that you need, to get things stabilized. And there's also acts as checks and balances. And they draw their strength from the needs of their constituents. So it is also time, even if you decide not to sue the government, to hold our lawmakers accountable because they are representing us, to insist this is what we want. We have just dissected the journey of passage of National Health Act, the number of years it took. It was a lot of pressure. At the end of the day, we got it right. But we're at this crossroad of its full implementation now. And I think it's instinctive and it's responsibility of each and every one of us to push and ensure. And who said that individuals cannot sue? You can sue so that people will wake up. It's not trying to malign anybody. So when you sue, we'll all be able to sit in a round table and say, oh, we didn't get it right here, we got it wrong here. How do we make amends, to move forward, to make progress? When you talk of the pressure groups, these are the areas that should be looking into, those key fundamental areas, going down to the grassroots. What can we get corrected? Simple things that will get corrected that will ignite and elevate this nation to, the expected landmark where we belong.
Sure.
So it is a key responsibility, and I will encourage each and every one of us, even talking about it as we have seen it as something very important. Other media institutions should also escalate this because of the importance,
True.
especially with what is going on around our country today.
Prof, just before we go, because I understand we're totally out of time, my director has been trying to let me know that. And still on the whole issue of legislative intention, I would like your take on certain aspects of the NHA which critics have continuously argued should never have been passed in the law. And I'm talking about sections like 48, 49, 51, 52, and even 53. Critics say these sections more or less directly or indirectly endorse trafficking in human embryos related now to reproductive health and and organs as well. As well as promoting or encouraging sales and trade in human tissues or blood products from a living person without their informed consent.
No,
especially
that's
but it does also say towards the end.
It's very, very clear there.
But what it says towards the end there is that this can happen only for medical investigations and treatment in emergency cases. And that is the grouse for most critics. But I guess you want to say that is not what is explicitly
that's not the content.
Provided for in the
it's just like somebody you want to take a section of the law into context. You just go and lift, a phrase out of there. You can only understand this and be able to do a good interpretation when you read the entire segment. You understand what I mean?
True.
So it is very clear there.
You cannot take one part in isolation.
Yes, it is very, very clear there. And the emphasis always has been on maintaining the medical ethics and standard. Okay? The medical ethics is there. And this same part of the law that we're talking about is also brought in the regulatory agencies to ensure that things are done according to rules and regulations. And of course, you cannot transplant organ without the consent of any individual consent, or even donation. And donation is not for sale, it's something that is voluntary when and where it is needed. That is health technology in action. But people will also have their own grounds and their own extreme views and thoughts. But when you put this into right perspective and balance it out, then you'll be able to see the soul, the message being passed there. I don't think there's any mistake in this segment at all. Well, it is very, very clear and expressly clear. And nobody will be spared. Anybody that goes against the rules and regulation guiding transplantation of organs, guiding even transfusion of blood and stuff like that. There are a group of individuals that don't believe in blood transfusion. It is their right, and you give it to them. If they present something to you and say, don't transfuse me and stuff like that, well, that is their own right. But they must not, force it down the throat of everyone those that do not believe in that, because we are talking of science here. And science is science, but science without regulation can be dangerous. And that regulation is very clearly stated and inserted in that segment of the law. And anybody can go and read it. Read the full segment and not just take a section.
This is an expansive law, like we said from the get-go, from the start. There are different sections. I know we've talked about sections 20 and a few others. There are, of course, other sections that are equally as important. We will take our time and raise issues on other sections of this law so that we can increase awareness and, you know, sensitize citizens on, you know, their rights under this Healthcare Act and just what they could do in certain situations or when they find themselves in certain situations. But more importantly, we also use it as an avenue to continue the advocacy for the implementation of the 1%, you know, allocation to the law, consolidated revenue fund. Professor Titus Sunday Bekwe, otorhinolaryngologist, health policy and management expert, and yes, Provost College of Health Medicines or College of Health Sciences, University of Abuja, and Secretary General Association of Provosts of Colleges of Medicine in Nigeria. Prof, we appreciate you. I appreciate your thoughts on this subject matter. Thank you so much indeed for coming on Insight.
It's my pleasure, and I will urge Nigerians to keep this segment of discussion on because it's very important.
True.
The Consolidated Revenue Fund we are talking of is also part of our constitution. Anybody can read the chapter 81 of the constitution. It's very, very clear there. You know, the section 81 of Nigerian constitution. So it's there, it's well embedded. Let's do the right thing, and everybody will be happy for it at the end of the day.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Prof. Elizabeth Omori is up next, and our conversation will be paying tribute to our servicemen and women, as well as our fallen heroes. Elizabeth Omori is up next.
Military veteran welfare is a broad system of support for former service members, focusing on essential areas such as physical and mental health care, financial security through pensions and disability benefits, access to housing, employment opportunities, and successful social integration. On this segment, we will look at service, veterans, welfare, and national security. And my guest, Grace Morenike Henry, Chairman, National Council of the Nigerian Legion, will speak to us. Thank you so much, Ma, for joining us on Insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for inviting me to your studio.
Thank you so much. Now, we'll be talking about the veterans. We'll be remembering them and honor the 7 personnel, veterans and fallen heroes who paid the price for national security. Ma, let's hear from you. How is welfare for this group of people?
First of all, I will use this period to thank the Mr. President and his wife because it's the first time a female will be appointed into the Nigerian Legion as a leader, because I feel that Mr. President, being a man, he knows what a woman can do and how a woman can bring us home and bring things together. I say thank you, sir. Number one, I will use this opportunity to plead with all Nigerians that they should please look into the welfare of the veterans, because the federal government cannot do it alone. I've always been pleading with the private company to support. Even during the employment, there are some of them that can still work. We have about 774 local governments in the country, which we have in all the local governments, we have veterans that we can really still use them for this insecurity and all that is happening. If you really take proper care of them, I think they are willing to help and to support the nation.
Now let's talk about motivation. Now you've touched on the spate of insecurity, what they can still do. So for 7 men and veterans, what is the motivation for them like in the military community?
Actually, the Minister of Defense now and the State Minister of Defense, when he was a former CDS, he has been one person since our Zoom office that he has been a good supporter to us. After when he was a CDS, that the state minister introduced me to him as the Legion chairman. He has always been there, be listening, and try to help, and how he can see the veterans community to move forward and to help the country and work hand in hand with the serving people as a backup. The pension has been very regular, and there is no month that we've ever missed our pension, since it has been a very good development.
Okay, so what is your support system like for families of soldiers in conflict zones? What is the council doing? How do you foster their support system so that they don't feel left out or they don't feel abandoned at any point in time?
The states, the local governments, and the federal government, because now we're even trying to have an estate called a Renewal Hope Veteran Association, Veterans Village. For after the service, they can see a place to move into. Because most times we are used to the barracks, we don't rent house, and after the service to even get an accommodation become a problem. But if the state governments, with what the federal government are doing, and private sector, to partner with veterans having our own estates in order to support the veteran, I think it will go a long way for the veterans and their widows.
Now, talking about widows and their dependents, what is the role of your council in ensuring that life is comfortable for them aside housing? How do you engage them?
Now, my period in the office now, we're looking into how we can get some of them trained, like empowering them and help them in their business in one way or other. That's why we're pleading the society to join hand with the council to help, not to leave it for the government and the council alone to do, because it's a very wide project. It's not what council alone can do.
How should Nigerians and the military community be more alert to activities around them? And what is the council doing within the military community to ensure that, the efforts of our men and women out there do not go in vain? What is the council doing to ensure that people are more alert to security matters?
There is no village that we don't have a military, retired veterans.
Yes.
When you motivate them, they will be there to work for you. Because veterans are ready to work at any time, at any day. I remember my secondary school time, 80s. We have veterans that are like our security, that work for the school, secondary school then. We can still go back to that period, motivate them, give them something to work on, and let them feel along. Definitely, they will be there to support the country, the insecurity in the country. Even though if those things are not there, which I know they are even doing it for now, they are ready to support, because being a soldier is a soldier.
Yes.
You can never sit back at home, seeing something wrong,
and keep quiet.
And keep quiet. You will still want to work and show yourself and say, this is what I've been doing, this is who I am. So I plead with the country. Don't just neglect them. Don't just leave them. Empower them, help them, promote them. Don't leave them with their pensions alone. Encourage them to work for the country. Employ them. They are ready to work. You can even, I know we have a lot of private security everywhere. You can employ them to be a supervisor or a support to other private company, because what they learned when they were training, you can't compare it with what a private sector are doing. So knowledge is power. You can't take that knowledge away from the veterans, because they still have it and it's still there. So once you employ them to join with the private security sector, you move the country forward. We work hand in hand together.
You are the chairman of the council. So what's going to be new? In what ways would you be making an impact in the military community?
Number one, I'm looking into the estate for them. And I'm looking for, because some people retire age and rank, they can still work.
Yes.
and some people voluntarily retirement, they can still work. So we are looking into how we can partner with some companies and some organizations to give them a job and to employ them so they can be still useful in the society.
Yes.
Instead of just staying at home. You know what it takes to train a soldier is not a small something, it's not a small tax-paying money. So we can't just abandon them, go and sit down there because of retired. We still need to do something for them, to employ them and give them something to do to boost their morale.
Yes. Let's talk health for the military community. How are you strengthening health system or access to health care for them?
Some private sector have come up.
Okay.
That they are ready to partner with us, at least for us to pay 50% of the health maintenance for us, which we are still looking towards to.
Okay. How do you handle women veterans within the military community? How do you attend to their needs?
Critical issue. And, you know, it happens on female veteran married to a veteran, married to a military man. You can imagine a soldier marrying a soldier, an officer marrying an officer.
And then sometimes their children might take the same path.
You see, sometimes so the husband died, the woman is there to take care of the children. Although we have a female veteran group now that we formed, actually I was the person that formed it. That was sometimes last year. So to look into the affairs and situation of the female veteran, you know, it's very difficult for women to come out and say, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm experiencing in my marriage, in around my children. But when we have a female military veteran association that we have now, you will see one of your friends that you can easily talk to and say, this is what I'm going through, this is what I want. You know, from there, they take up your issue and help you and stand by you. And we've been doing that since the association has been formed.
Back to the issue of the government. In what areas do you think the government should come in to help personnel, veterans, serving personnel, retired personnel, so that they can contribute more to their advancement and what they do?
Especially health-wise, to support them in their medical. Now our pension is going on fine. We can't complain of that. That's because of money. But the society should still come up and help them in one thing or another. So make sure that their morale comes up and they feel good to help the country.
To help the country. Now, one of my final questions to you is this: how do we strengthen the bond between the military and civilians? So how do we change the narrative around that?
It's a very difficult situation, but the military people are the best people you can have as a friend. Because
for real?
Yes. They are the best that you can have as a friend because they have this motivation that and with you, nothing can happen with you.
Yes.
I'm ready to take your cross. I'm ready to be by you. They don't betray easily. They're always there for you, but once they don't betray you, don't betray them.
So we'll be celebrating, we'll be remembering some fallen heroes who pay the price for national integrity. What will be your words to their families, to the government, and 7 personnel protecting the integrity of Nigeria, safeguarding the peace of Nigeria? What will be your words to them as we celebrate them?
I will just appeal to the widow. It's not easy to lose the loved one, that they should take heart. The God Almighty that is the husband of the widow will continue to help them, because there is nothing you can give to them that can be, even though the husband is not there, even though the husband is there, they know that he's there, he can't provide, but they still feel the impact of the man, that this man is still with me. Unlike the man is not there. You know, some of them go out there to beg. You don't even know whether the person will give to you or not. The way the person will behave to you. I tell them, I won't say sorry. I tell them to hold that. The God Almighty will see them through and direct them to the direct good paths. Good person that will support them and will have their feeling in hearts by God's grace. The serving people, I will also encourage them They are serving. They don't sleep day and night. They are always there in the bush. They don't even know whether they will come back home or come back home. I pray the Spirit of God Almighty will continue to protect them.
Amen.
And be with them. And they should always remember their family they left at home. And before they even go to anywhere, those of them that are married should remember to keep something for the woman and the children at home. In case of incasity, the woman will have something to back up on. Because military job, you don't know whether you are coming back home, you are not coming back home. So I pray wherever they are, those of them in Northeast, those of them in Southeast, God Almighty will continue to guide them and be with them.
Grace Morenike Henry, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Insight, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just before we wrap up things on this episode, I'd like to recall a conversation we had in 2025 on the state of our politics. Dr. Ogaga Ifowodo was our guest, and he spoke to several issues which remain germane even now.
So we have to be careful to really scrutinize these policies and then know that at the end of the day, it's not because there's lack of ideological difference, but the interest, that will to power, that desire to be the ones governing, to be the ones in power, not to be left out of the political, power structure, so that you are far from the divvying up of the resources of the land, the access to political power, influence, appointments, and so on. That is what drives them more than any ideological commitment to Nigeria.
Doc, let me quickly move you on to Rivers State. I mean, that's yet another topical issue. The political situation in that state appears to have de-escalated, but some persons still criticize the process, describing the current state of affairs, as a piece of the graveyard. I'm not saying that's the piece that comes before I'm just saying what people are saying. But they say the process that led to where we are right now in Rivers State is a fragile elite backed truth that bypassed the people entirely. In your opinion, what specific measurable targets do you think the people of Rivers State should, at this point, demand from the Fubara administration to ensure that this peace, this peace that we're talking about translates into tangible democratic dividends and not just the quiet consolidation of a new political machine?
I may be simplistic about it,
please.
But to me, it is between Fubara and Wike. That's where the crisis started. That's where it will end. I read recently that Wike says the problem has ended. He and Fubara are back, to being on the same page. I hope it remains so. And if it remains so, peace will return. The people at the grassroots always take the cue from their leaders because they owe allegiance to them. So if the leaders are saying we want peace, we bury the hatchet, well, then I think there will be peace. Let me just leave it at that as a way of picking at the basic minimum.
Fantastic. So now I'm moving on to yet another germane issue, the question on Nigeria's democratic evolution and how certain socio-economic development continue to test our resilience as a democracy. Today, we're contending with issues like, secessionist agitations in the southeast, insecurity across the country, and the troubling cost of living crisis that we have. Even now, I hear people asking the question whether, as a country and as a people, we're nearing a breaking point. Doc, time and again, history teaches us that, a nation is perpetually a work in progress. Ours is a work in progress. Most democracies are. But based on your critical observations of some of the things you've seen, is this current phase that we are a predictable, albeit painful, part of our democratic evolution towards a more united democracy? Do things have to get really bad before it eventually begins to get better? When do we turn the curve?
If you follow history, then you have to say yes, that things have to get bad before they get better. Because who was the philosopher that said, I don't know if it's Benjamin Franklin, scholar, intellectual, that said every civilization is a document of barbarism, No, not what Benjamin Franklin. Walter Benjamin, I meant to say. I beg your pardon. Okay. You know, that every civilization is a document of barbarism. When you look at it, pare away all the shine that you see today, all the rights that we take for granted today, and then look at how those rights were achieved, then you realize that so much struggle, so much blood, so much suffering had passed before we got there. Now, do we necessarily have to repeat the past? Can't we learn from the mistakes of the past and have a less painful way to what we want? That is the question to be answered. But as long as we have the problems here and we know the causes, the question will be, can we tackle them honestly and sincerely without the country falling apart first? My answer is that we can. Okay. My answer is that the fact that Nigeria has even stayed together for as long as it has, when it was thrown right into a crisis of being one or divided just 6 years after independence, means that we are past the biggest test, and no test that is going to come our way now is going to undo us unless we ourselves willingly want it to undo us. But I think the easiest way to also avoid a lot of those problems is to hit the call that the opposition, the genuine left in Nigeria, has been making for a long time, which is, after colonialism, Nigeria by now ought to have sat down to decide for itself a proper, true, genuine and representative constitution of the people, made by the people. So we agree that this is what we want our country to be. These will be the relations between the constituent parts, but not to just, kind of lackadaisically think that things are going to be all right. Why haven't we had a sovereign national conference until now? As much as people might criticize President Bola Ahmed Tinubu today, he's the one actually who's done a few things.
It seems as though, Doc, you're not satisfied with the amendments that have been made to the Constitution. Are you saying you'd rather prefer a complete overhaul of the entire Constitution?
No, in fact, that's where I was going, that there are two ways. Either we have a complete overhaul, have a brand new Constitution for all, which is my preferred way. Okay. It's preferred for any nation. What can be better than, after every constitution starts by we the people, right? So what better way to say it is we the people than to actually bring the elected, freely and democratically elected representatives of the people together to then decide on what we want. But if that is proving too difficult for any number of socio-political reasons now, what can we do in the alternative? And this is where I'm going to praise President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because at least two of the things he's done so far. First one, autonomy to the local governments. It's one of the things that ought to have been done long ago. People might quarrel or quibble about how he did it, whether the judicial going to court over it to do it was the best way, whether the court gave the right decision. But what we know is that the goal has always been autonomy for the local governments. He achieved that. Secondly, the exclusive legislative list and some of the items on it, including power generation. Power is one of the biggest problems that Nigeria has. To centralize power in a country that can hardly generate enough electricity to even turn on the lights in homes, let alone manufacturing and industry, to now take it from the exclusive legislative list and allow states to generate their power. It's already beginning to nibble from the corners, if you like, are those things that we will do at a sovereign national conference to give true meaning to self-determination, true governance, and empowering the federating units more than the center. So if before the end of his tenure he does even a little more of this, we will be inching our way closer. But if you ask me, the preference is let the people come together in a conclave, in a conference, and decide a new constitution for themselves.
And that's it on this week's episode of Insight. Do join us same time next week for more on the program. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Remain patriotic always. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.